Hello, everyone, back tuning in to our latest Bank Holiday Monday historic video. So we're going to have a look at the winters of 1953, 1954, 1954, 1955 and 1955-1956. 3 winters from the mid-1950s for today's historic video. This is following on, of course, from the historic video that we did on May Day, Bank Holiday Monday, which that one looked at the summers of 1954, 1955, 1956. Very interesting period of weather occurs through the mid-1950s. So we did the summers at the last Bank Holiday weekend. This weekend we are doing the winters. So thanks so much for tuning in to Gaz Weathers on your Bank Holiday Monday. Going to be a long video this, of course. It's a historic video, always quite long. Got 3 winters to cover, so gonna be a bit of an epic, to be honest. But I hope you enjoyed it. And if you was around in the 50s, I hope it brings back some memories. If you weren't, well, I hope you get the opportunity to see what the weather was like during the mid-1950s. These historic videos would not be possible without 2 elements. I'm just the presenter of them, but the really important parts of these historic videos are the historic archive from weathercentral.de. They've got historic charts going all the way back to 1871. And also, of course, Trevor Harley's personal weather website. Much of the information, and all the information that you hear in this video, will come from Trevor Harley's personal weather website. I wasn't born in the 1950s, wasn't even a twinkle in mum and dad's eye, I don't think, in the 1950s. So, to be honest, I have got no recollection of these events, which means I have to get the information from somewhere, and that somewhere is Trevor Harley's personal weather website. So you can find a link to both weathercentral.de and Trevor Harley's website on the links page. Huge thank you, as always, to both of those websites for allowing me to use both their charts and their information. As I say, it would not be possible to do the historic videos at Gaz Weathers without Weather Central and Trevor Harley. So big thumbs up, big thank you to both of those websites. Just say this historic video will be kept at Gaz Weathers indefinitely, so if you can't watch it all in one go, it is going to be a long one, as I say, don't worry. It'll be on the website within the historic section indefinitely. Once we're done with the charts, we'll have some reanalysis from our good friend James Atquill, and we'll also have some photos as well. So I think we'd better get on with it, because it's going to be a long one. I've gone on for long enough. So we're going to start with 53-54, and we're going to start in November 1953. What is interesting about all of these winters, and they are cold winters, but it's interesting that all of them have quite mild starts. So November, December on all of these winters is generally quite mild. So this is indicative of what we're going to be looking at in these winters for November and December. This is the 1st of November 1953, and a classic low pressure dominated scenario with low pressure out to west. So it is high pressure over towards Scandinavia, western Russia, but really low pressure is the driver here. November 1953 was a warm month with a central temperature of 8.5 degrees. We move through, and you see low pressure carries on pushing across the country through the opening week of the month. And then we start to find a little bit of higher pressure building across France. This is a very mild scenario here, with bands of rain and strong winds moving into the north and the west of the country in particular. We get through into the middle part of the month. This is November, and pressure is rising from France. It's 15th of November, and pressure is rising from France, producing quite a bit of dry weather with low pressure out to the north and the west. Excuse me, these areas of low pressure bringing in copious amounts of rain to western Scotland and Northern Ireland, but generally much of southern England mostly dry. And that high pressure continues to intensify as we get through into the second half of the month, which is 17th of November, with high pressure really dominating the weather. And that high pressure continues into the 21st and on to the 24th, still a lot of high pressure influences. Notice the high is beginning to drift up towards Scandinavia, so starting to turn a little bit colder perhaps now with winds coming in from the southeast, but it isn't a classically cold scenario by any means. It sees areas of low pressure that are still out to the west, producing rain for them. The end of the month finds low pressure diving southwards, becoming cut off down to the south of the country, and then we go through to the 30th and the west is re-established. So you get the idea that there's hardly any cold weather through this November. A little bit of frost perhaps in the southeast close to the ridge, but generally it's an Atlantic driven mild westerly month. As I say, it has a central temperature of 8.5 degrees Celsius, so it was pretty warm. There was less than an inch of rain recorded across parts of Essex, Suffolk and the West Midlands this month, so it was quite dry, to be honest, in the south and the east. We go through into December, and this is another very mild and mostly dry month. There's a warm start to December 1953 with Llandudno and Aber in North Wales going up to into the mid-teens Celsius, and the highest temperature is actually in London on the 2nd, where we go up to 17 degrees, 17.2. You can see what's going on. We're bringing up these very warm southerly southwesterly winds. We had a lot of this in December 2016. Here we are on the 2nd of December 1953, putting up a very warm air, but as I say, took temperatures easily into the mid-teens Celsius. London went up to 17 Celsius on this day. A lot of cloud, but it was very warm and muggy. We move through into the 4th, low pressure again, breaking through from the Atlantic, bringing quite a bit of wet weather, and this quiet start doesn't last because we find that we get high pressure building to the east of the country, bringing up these southerly winds. So these look quite mild, but they're bringing slightly cooler air up actually out of the continent. There's a little bit of frost going on at this point, but again, nothing particularly exciting from a cold perspective. We go through the middle part of the month. That high pressure is increasingly broken down as low pressure starts to move in off the Atlantic, but this is still a very mild period that's taking place here, with temperatures easily going into double digits across most parts of the country. 18th tries to pull the high pressure back in again to the east, so there's a bit of a duel going on this month really between the low pressure in the west and the high pressure that's out to the east. We start to run up towards Christmas, still mild. Look, high pressure generally to the south and the east, low pressure to the north and west. The winds are coming in from the southwest. This is Christmas Eve, and we're bringing a band of wet weather across the country then, and that takes into Christmas Day, which is a mild one. Winds are in from the west, and we've got showers or perhaps even longer spells of rain coming through over this Christmas period, but again, temperatures are generally mild. And then we run up towards the end of December, in towards the New Year period. That's a little bit colder. Pressure is recentering out to the west of the country, so the air is coming down from the northwest. This isn't a cold scenario by any means, but it is a little bit cooler, and there certainly would have been the risk of night frost, I think, as we approach the new year of 1953-1954. So this is how we go into January 1954. This is a cold month. It has a central temperature of 2.9 Celsius, but at this point, we're not particularly cold. Actually, we've still got high pressure centred more or less to the west of us. It's cool. There's a risk of night frost, but it's nothing particularly out of the ordinary. But notice to the south and the east of this high pressure, we're putting down a much colder east to northeasterly wind in towards southeastern parts of Europe. That's bringing bitterly cold air down into the southeast. So things beginning to just change a little bit in terms of the atmospheric setup. The first 5 days generally quite mild, a little bit of an easterly flow across the south and the east, but it's not a particularly cold one. High pressure is generally ridging through the country at this point. But then we go through to the Pacific, and we start to see a bit of a change. That high pressure begins to pull out into the Atlantic. We start to bring colder air down from the north. First push of colder air this winter starts to move in to the north of Scotland. That generally slides to the east, so this takes into the 10th of January, and you see that the trough is elongating through central eastern parts of Europe, bringing bitterly cold air there. We generally are still close to this ridge of high pressure in the Atlantic, with the air revolving around the top. It is colder air, but it isn't yet a particularly cold scenario. And then things generally back into the west. So that first attempt at turning it cold really doesn't come to a great deal. Winds back into the west on the 12th, and we start to bring Atlantic-driven stuff back in once again. Notice very cold looking weather across Scandinavia and down into much of Eastern Europe. Westerlies rule as we go through into the 15th, and this lifts the temperatures back up. 15 Celsius was exceeded somewhere in the British Isles on the 14th, 15th and 20th of January. You're probably wondering how we came away with central temperature 2.9 Celsius. I'm going to show you in a second. We go through to the 20th, still generally quite mild. Look at this, nothing particularly dramatic taking place at this point. It's still Atlantic driven. But the 21st and then the 22nd starts to see a change. Look at this. We begin to break out of those westerlies as high pressure gets going across Scandinavia. At long last, after this mild Atlantic-driven winter, yes, high pressure at 1,035 millibars is beginning to form across Scandinavia. Now, up to this point, there hadn't really been any cold weather since the winter of 1947. So we had a long run of very mild conditions during the late 1940s and the early 1950s. We did get a cold month in December 1950. That kind of has shades of December 81 and December 2010. Not as severe as those two, but it was a pretty cold and snowy month in December 1950. But other than that, generally, it had been really quite mild from 1947 to this point, January 1954. So this starts to come as a bit of a shock, I would think. See the high pressure ridging over Scandinavia, starting to turn the winds back into the east. And here come those easy winds as we go through into the 23rd of January. The winds are going into the east. High pressure's winning the battle. Low pressure is stalling in the Atlantic. And there's a weather front trying to move in here on the 24th, bumping up against this high pressure. Here we go into the 25th. This is a snow event, a classic snow event moving in off the Atlantic. The high pressure over Scandinavia bring bitterly cold air in from the east, meeting low pressure trying to keep milder air maintained off the Atlantic. And the weather front in between the cold and mild air is producing quite a classic snow event. That low pressure sinks away to the south as we go through into the 26th. So this tells us that the high pressure over Scandinavia is winning the battle. And as we move into the upper air temperatures, you can see how that cold air wins the battle. So this is from the 25th, showing a big warm sector here out to the north and west of the country. That's producing rain. Cooler air to the east producing snow. But as we go through to the 26th, look at that. The yellow's gone. The cold air has undercut, squeezed out that warmer sector. And there's a huge mass of cold air, bitterly cold air, severely cold air, waiting to the east. So this is a classic example of a snow event, with the low pressure losing the battle, the mild air losing the battle as the cold air comes in and forces that milder sector out of the way. We go through to the end of January 1954, firmly in an easterly flow, and it stays cold then into the end of the month. In fact, it gets even colder, Trevor says, but a notable cold spell begins on the 29th. So despite that snow event, the real cold, that despite the event we had on the 24th, 25th, 26th, the real cold for this winter gets going on the 29th. And we start to bring bitterly cold air from the east. Here we are on the 31st January, the last day of the month, with bitterly cold air moving in. There was generally temperature staying below freezing all day at this point, with severe nighttime frost as well. We move through into February 1954, and this is how we look with the upper air temperatures at the end of January. Very cold, and into February 1954, yes, those easterly winds are still maintained, with high pressure over Scandinavia bringing in that bitterly cold air from the east. And the easterly winds stay with us then into the 2nd, on into the 5th. We get 6 days of persistent frost through this early part of February 1954, with temperatures going down to minus 20 degrees at Welshpool on the 2nd. Very cold northeast winds sweeping across the country, and parts of the south remaining below freezing by both day and by night from the 29th of January through to the 7th of February. Even Falmouth in Cornwall stayed below freezing for quite a few days during this period. And snow, because there is snow being driven in on these east winds, it lays up to 6 feet deep across the North Downs in Kent and across Essex. Parts of the sea are freezing. So a really dramatic big freeze taking place at this point through the opening days of February 1954. There's the upper air temperatures on the 6th of February 1954. They don't look all that dramatic, certainly compared to the earlier upper air temperatures, and I'll go back to them. The earlier upper air temperatures that we had at the end of January, very, very cold air coming through. But as we go through to the 6th of February with the upper air temperatures, they don't look that dramatic. But of course, the damage has already been done. The severe cold has already been established across the country. And although the upper air temperatures aren't all that severe at this point, my word, it was jolly cold down on the surface. Things change as we go through into the 7th. Low pressure drives in off the Atlantic. That brings a band of heavy snow across the country, followed by something a little bit less cold. So it starts to turn a bit milder here as we go through into the 8th. Winds returning to the Atlantic. So yes, temperatures lift up a little bit. That's quite a snow event that takes place to end this cold weather. We move through towards the middle of February 1954, this is Valentine's Day, and still in a block scenario, high pressure across Scandinavia into the north of Scotland, low pressure around the UK. This is producing rain, sleet or snow, and then we go through to the 18th and on into 21st, and the battle is maintained really between low pressure in the Atlantic, high pressure to the east of the country, and again we have weather systems trying to move into that cold air, bumping up against the cold air and stalling and producing rain or snow. The 24th of February sees the Atlantic starting to break through a little bit more definitively, and then we get this really deep trough sinking down across the country at the end of the month, bringing in a return of northerly winds. So as we go through into March 1954, it actually turns quite cold again with this trough over the country, producing rain in places but also snow, particularly in the north. And we go through to the 10th, and finally at this point it's starting to turn a little bit milder as the air is beginning to go round into the Atlantic. That was more or less the end of the winter of 1953-1954. So it was a fairly cold winter, but a lot of mild weather going on, especially in the first part of the winter. And the cold certainly wasn't sustained. But this is just really the start of these very cold winters. So we're going to go on next, have a look at 54-55, which is an even colder and more severe winter. So again, we start in November 1954, and we have low pressure out to the west of the country. It's another mild month. November 1954 has a central temperature of 6.9 Celsius. It's also a very wet month, especially in the west and the southwest. So it's a really Atlantic driven month. I'll whiz through these charts very quickly. You can see it was an Atlantic onslaught, a bit of a ridge building there on the 15th, but it didn't come to a great deal. It tried to get up towards a Scandinavian high on the 20th, but low pressure's coming back in on the 24th, just generally maintaining the mild Atlantic driven flow. It wasn't as mild as November 1953, but it was a mild month, as I say, with a central temperature of 6.9. It turns increasingly stormy into the end of November 1954. There are notable gales on, when are they? I'm going to have a quick look at my notes. On the 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th and 30th of November 1954, we have these areas of low pressure driving in, producing gales on the 27th, another batch of gales on the 28th, a renewed batch of gales, look at this, from the 29th through to the 30th of November 1954. Really stormy end to the month. December 1954 is also a mild month with a central temperature of 6.8. Very, very mild month. And this month is mainly notable for the destructive tornado that occurs on the 8th. I'll show you what happened in a second. But we start off in December 1954 with Atlantic-driven weather. Again, it's all low pressure out to the north and the west of the country. This is December 1954. Again, very much in an Atlantic-driven type pattern. Very mild in the south as well, with this ridge of high pressure across France dragging up the air out of the Azores on the 4th of December. Now we get through to the 7th and we've got this slightly cooler northwesterly flow developing, but then this area of low pressure develops and bombs out a little bit out to the west of Ireland. This produces some very interesting weather on the 8th of December. We get a tornado, and it's a destructive one at that, across north and west London late in the afternoon of the 8th of December 1954. It injures 12 people. It occurs through a thunderstorm. The thunderstorm started in Portsmouth with a waterspout, and it just gathered strength as it moved inland, producing really quite a severe tornado, quite an unusual tornado. It destroyed the Gunnersbury tube station in western London. It ripped a roof off and injured 6 people. A car was lifted 15 feet into the air at Acton. And this, I say, through the afternoon of December 1954, December the 8th, 1954, it hit around 5 o'clock and then faded away from around 5:30. So really stormy conditions there as we go through the 8th into the 9th of December 1954. That low pressure is very, very dominant, and it just continues unsettled really into the middle part of the month, with again low pressure just driving in off the Atlantic. No sign of anything cold taking place at all during this period. The 17th and the 18th of December 54, again very mild and also very wet. We have 256 millimetres of rain falling in 2 days across western parts of Scotland on the 17th and 18th of December, with these long fetched southwesterlies dragging up exceptionally mild air, also moisture laden air out of the Azores. We know all about that from December 2016. We go into run up to Christmas. The high pressure pulls out to the west. It's still Atlantic driven, a little bit cooler here on Christmas Eve, starting to bring down more of a northwesterly flow. This is still very Atlantic based, but it's a little bit cooler as we go into Christmas Eve. Christmas Day 1954 finds the winds backing into the west again. It's probably another band of rain moving through, and then that takes us into the end of this very mild December of 1954. Again, it's all Atlantic driven. Although as we get through to the very end of the month, we're starting to get ridging developing from the south, building up towards Scandinavia. This is the first signs of what's ahead as we get through into 1955. So this is how we go into New Year's Eve 54. Again, high pressure is very much starting to block off the Atlantic now. It isn't particularly cold, but it is cooler. There's probably quite a bit of frost going on as the wind's going into the south-southeast, starting to drag cooler continental air in. But the main thing is the wall of high pressure that's beginning to set up across Scandinavia. As I say, signs of things to come. This is New Year's Day 1955, and you see now we are very much breaking out of that westerly flow. So just to show you how quickly, always astonished really, how quickly we can break out of these Atlantic driven onslaught patterns and start to revert the winds back into the west. So this is January 1955, New Year's Day, and January 55 is a cold month, has a central England temperature of 2.6 degrees, so it is really quite a cold month, and haven't been a January as cold as this since 1947, which obviously was a lot colder than this is, but haven't really been a cold January since 1947. So we go through the early days of January 1955, bringing in these bitterly cold easterly winds, high pressures over Scandinavia. Look at this beautiful easterly here. The isobars are going back into Russia, dragging the air out of Russia via this Scandinavian high and bring most bitterly cold temperatures across Europe. These are the upper air temperatures. They don't look particularly severe in terms of the upper air temperatures at this point in 1955, but there's some very cold low-level continental air. The 4th of January 1955 is a snowy day. We have 15 centimetres of snow in London, the heaviest fall that they'd had since 1947. Again, all courtesy of these east winds dragging in snow out of the continent and over the North Sea. Daytime temperatures generally staying around freezing all day. Now, after the 4th, it starts to turn a little bit less cold, so it's still very blocked. High pressure to the south of Greenland with low pressure to the south of the country. But you notice the isobars, if you follow them back, the air is not originating from Russia now, it's originating from the Mediterranean. So although the wind is still generally easterly, it just starts to turn a little bit less cold, and we begin to drag up milder air from the south. But it's still a very blocked scenario, so the 7th of January we're indicative of that, with high pressure blocking to the north and the low pressure generally down to the south of the country. The 9th of January 1955 tries to bring low pressure back in off the Atlantic. So as we move through, I've got a bit mixed up with the charts, as we move through, there we go, into the 10th of January, you see the westerlies start to return and we begin to bring low pressure back in. But notice all this cold air gathering up to the north of Scotland. This is when things start to turn quite severe, because the Atlantic is bringing in bands of rain, and this cold air, very cold air, bitterly cold air, is starting to dig down from the north. So as we move into the 12th, you see the cold air, the northerly winds are really starting to dig in here, and it just turns very cold as we move through into the 13th of January 1955, with bitterly cold northerly winds plunging down across the country. There's a lot of snow coming down with this as well. A real blizzard taking place through many parts of the country on the 13th. Here's the upper air temperatures indicating the extent of the cold air that's plunging down across the country from the north. The 14th finds low pressure down to the south, engaging with this cold air from the north. That's producing a lot of snow. So really snowy spell going on here. The upper air temperatures indicate just rain along the south coast, but generally from the M4 north, it is snow and really cold conditions up across Scotland. We go through into the 16th and do it all over again with another area of low pressure coming up from the southwest, again engaging with this severely cold air that's down from the north. Notice Scotland never turns milder, by the way, so it's very cold there. And again, this low pressure produces a lot of snow across the country from the 16th into the 17th. By this point, parts of the north are cut off, so we've got blizzard conditions over Lancashire and Yorkshire, with lots and lots of snow showers across Scotland. There actually had to be an airdrop because the condition was so severe in the north. Operation Snowdrop was instigated to provide air relief to cut off villages in the far north. Esdelmuir had continuous frost from the 10th through to the 15th, and there was more snow down to the south of the country as well. So really cut off snowy conditions across northern parts of the country. The 16th is an interesting day as well, because it had a lot of pollution that interacted with the cold front that was produced in the snow, and this caused daytime darkness. It suddenly went completely dark in London on the 16th of January 1955. Again, it was a combination of pollution and a cold front producing snow that produced that daytime darkness, but quite unusual conditions. Stays cold into the 19th, on into the 22nd. We've got a ridge through the country, so really cold air is maintained. But then, for the time being, that's the end of the cold weather, as milder winds begin to return for the end of January. And this is the last day of the month, ending it on generally quite a mild Atlantic driven note. We move through into February 1955 and start on a pretty mild note as well. So Atlantic driven areas of low pressure moving through. February 1955 is even colder in January, with centering temperature of 1.2. So despite this mild start, it is very quickly going to turn a lot colder again. Here we go to the 7th, still looking generally quite mild and Atlantic driven as we do on the 8th, but then from there on to the 9th it turns colder again. This ridge has built over Spain and Portugal, tried to turn things milder, but hasn't really come off. This low pressure is clearing to the east, turning the winds back into the north. There's a cold front here strung out. It's in this sort of position with the cold air digging down from the north yet again, and very slow now starting to push back in from the north once more. So we go through to the 10th again in a very cold northerly flow. That's bringing snow showers back into the north and the east of the country, and now we start to get proper northern blocking setting up. We've got proper high pressure over Greenland here with a trough of low pressure in the North Sea producing snow in the north and the east of the country on the 12th of February 1955. We move through into Valentine's Day, which is the 14th, again in cold conditions, and things get even more severe in the second half of the month. Look at this blocking that we've got around Greenland and Iceland, with this low pressure plunging down from the north and the east. Little bit of shades of December 2010 here, with gale force northerly winds and copious amounts of snow driving in from the north. Again, parts of central northern Scotland cut off, so Operation Snowdrop continues as we go through into this period, with these northerly winds really producing lots of snow in the north and the east of the country in particular. The 18th finds the isobars easing off, so we lose those severe gales, but it's still very cold, and we've got this trough of low pressure over the country, still probably enough to produce showers. But now the weather changes from heavy snow towards frost, and there was some very severe frost as we go through into this latter stage of February 1955. Minus 25 degrees was recorded at Braemar on the 23rd of February, and in Darwini on the 22nd we go down to minus 22. These are the lowest temperatures recorded in the UK since the winter of 1895. There's also heavy snow showers continuing through this period, particularly in the west, courtesy of this area of low pressure. So a really severely cold spell of weather here as we're going through the closing days of February 1955. There's the low pressure down to the southwest, producing a lot of snow on the 23rd in the south and west, but to the north it's the frost, and the severe frost that is the real issue. Snow went to a depth of 24 feet, I believe, at Buxton, and a famous snowdrift at Bleaf Gill is in this period as well, causing a train to be stuck in the snow in the Pennines. I think I might have a picture of that a little bit later on, to be honest. The end of February 1955 looks like this, but mild westerlies are trying to re-establish again, but the high pressure continues to the east of the country, and we move through into March, still generally with the cold air being maintained via that area of high pressure. It pulls out to the west of the country and returns winds into the north and the east through the opening week, so it stays cold. There's more snow and severe frost in the early part of March 1955. Finally, as we get through to the 11th, we start to see a relenting of the conditions as the winds return into the west, under this area of high pressure actually turns quite spring-like, and eventually it turns pretty wet and stormy. So that's winter of 54-55. We've got another cold winter to go, which is 55-56. Now this is a very interesting winter because it's generally very mild through the first part of it. I mean, it turns severely cold as we get through into February 1956. So I'm going to start with November 1955, and again it's a mild month, has a central temperature of 7.0, and it's pretty Atlantic based as well. There's a thunderstorm on the 6th of November, courtesy of this area of low pressure, but overall it is actually quite a settled and dry month. We move through to the 10th and then on into the 15th, finding high pressure building through the country, and that high pressure keeps it mostly dry and mild then as we move through into the latter stages of November. December 1955 has a central temperature of 5.4. It's generally quite a wet month, but it's fairly dry in the southeast, and again it's all Atlantic driven, so it's high pressure to the south, low pressure to the north and the west of the country. Try to turn a bit colder here as we go through into the 10th. We tried to bring down some colder air from the north, but it's a very ill-fated attempt to turn it colder. Generally, it's another mild Atlantic-driven type pattern we have going on. Excuse me. I think I'm going to have to stop and just have a quick glass of water. And we can resume. I've been talking non-stop for over half an hour, so I assume my throat is drying out just a little bit. But here we go into the 18th, and it's trying to turn a bit colder again from the north and northeast with this ridge building down from the north. Again, this doesn't really come to very much. This low pressure moves through, maintaining Atlantic, where it probably produces a bit of snow, this low pressure to the north, but overall not much. And then you go through to Christmas Eve, and it turns Atlantic driven again, very mild Christmas in 1955, as we've had in 53 and 54 as well. Of course, this is how the 28th of December 1955 looks, which was a very mild day. Temperatures reached 16 Celsius on this day in 1955. New Year's Eve looking like this. Again, it's Atlantic driven, it's pretty mild. It's slightly cooler with the air from the northwest, but it's still essentially Atlantic weather that is dominating. This is New Year's Day 1956. Again, it's mild, and it's a mild month that we have in January 1956 with a central temperature of 3.6. So it's quite low for a mild month, and you'll see why that happens right at the very end. But overall, again, it's another Atlantic-driven month with high pressure bridging through the country, low pressure to the north. Just a little bit cooler on the 8th of January 1956. This high pressure pulls out into the Atlantic, bringing the winds into the north just briefly, but it doesn't last for very long, and low pressure is back in on the 12th, producing quite a bit of rain, mild temperatures as well. Stays mild to the 16th of January 1956, and then go through to 21st of January 1956. It turns a little bit cooler from the northwest, but it's still, again, it's low pressure that is driving this, albeit now starting to sit to the east. This is the 24th of January 1956, and this is when things start to turn a little bit more interesting. We've got cold air pooling to the north and the northeast country. A very deep cold pool is sitting over Scandinavia in particular. Winds have gone into the north and northwest for us, so it is colder. It isn't severely cold by any means, but it is a colder type scenario, but the real cold is up across Scandinavia. But this is laying the groundwork for what's going to happen as we get to the end of the month. This is the 25th, low pressure again trying to come back in off the Atlantic, bringing those milder conditions through. The 26th is indicative of that. There's probably a band of rain here across the country. But again, notice how slow these westerlies are now coming in as we've got this cold pool, really deep cold pool, sitting to the north and the east of the country. The 27th, again, Atlantic is trying to break through, but it's stalling. And then on the 28th, we begin to build up that wall of pressure across Scandinavia and Germany as heights are rising there, starting to block off the Atlantic. Notice the isobars are going in to the south, to the north and west of the country. That's warm air advection, pumping up warmer air from the Atlantic into the Arctic, which, with this cold air already sitting over Scandinavia, allows the high pressure to take over. So the 29th of January starts to see quite a dramatic change taking place with a 1040 millibar area of high pressure over Scandinavia, The low pressure is across Greenland and Iceland. The winds are in from the south. We've got a band of rain, heavy rain as well, but the cold air is sitting just to the east. Here's the upper air temperatures on the 29th of January 1956, generally mild, but look how severely cold it is across Scandinavia, and that is on its way to us. So on the 30th, we find that the low pressure starts to stall, and this is when the cold air begins to move in, courtesy of that Scandinavian high. So Trevor Harley describes it like this: a low pressure moving into the English Channel on the 30th and 31st of January brought rain, turning to snow, and very cold polar continental air behind. On the 31st of January at Worthington, there was a dramatic fall in temperature from 7 Celsius at 8 a.m. in the morning to -2 Celsius at noon on the 31st. So a real plunge in temperature occurred through the morning of the 31st of January, with rain turning to powdery snow. Apparently many cars were immobilised by freezing rain. So it wasn't just snow that occurs on the 30th and the 31st of this cold air undercuts via the Scandinavian high. There's also freezing rain taking place as well. So this is a classic. We've got 1,045 millibar area of high pressure across Scandinavia. We've got a severe and deep cold pool sitting to the south and east of that area of high pressure, and then we've got low pressure over us stalling, with the cold air coming in from the east, undercutting and producing really severe conditions with freezing rain and heavy snow. Look at the extent of that cold pool that's sitting there just to the east of us on the 31st of January 1956. So we're going to the 1st of February, and the high pressure has won the battle across Scandinavia. The winds are in from the east. This is severely cold air pushing through. Look at these upper air temperatures. We've got the -15 Celsius isotherm across most parts of the country. The -20 Celsius isotherm is on the door of the east coast of England. This is kind of like the depth of cold that we had in January 1987. And on this day, the 1st of February 1956, we have a maximum temperature of below -5 degrees across the Midlands and southeastern parts of England. -6.7 was the maximum temperature at Lincoln, Stone, Silsoe and Froley. And there's a generally severe frost as well by night, with heavy snow driving in via these severely cold upper air temperatures. As I say, there's only been 2 or 3 times in the 20th century that had this depth of cold and severity of cold. One time was 1987, January 1987. Another time was February 1991. But undoubtedly, this day, the 1st of February 1956, was one of, perhaps not the, but one of the coldest days of the 20th century. Severe and brutal cold driving in from the east. The rest of the month was very cold as well. It has a central temperature of -0.2, so it was beneath freezing, actually, the Central England temperature during this February. The second, again, just look at the extent of those cold upper air temperatures. We're between, we've got -15 Celsius isotherm there across most parts of the country. -20 Celsius isotherm is again knocking on the door of the south. It's very unusual, very rare to find the -20 Celsius isotherm visiting the UK. Now, as always, with a very cold month, generally there isn't a great deal of snow. So actually the high pressure is the dominating factor this month, but doesn't allow a great deal of snow after that really snowy start. Of course, there was a lot of snow, both severely cold upper air temperatures in the opening day or two, but generally it's just a very dry, very cold month. So high pressure just sits around the country within this cold pool that we've got over the country. Low level air temperatures by the 6th don't look all that cold. The severe upper air temperatures receded back into East Europe, but it's still jolly cold during this point, with daytime temperatures still struggling to get above freezing and severe nighttime temperatures as well. The 10th of February finds a high pressure going back up towards Scandinavia, bringing in the easterly winds once again. This is producing more snow in the south and the east of the country, around the coast generally only. Otherwise, it's just bitingly cold and dry. So in this regard, it has similarities this February with February 1986. I've done a historic video on that as well, of course. Just a lot of dry and very cold anticyclonic weather, and it stays really anticyclonic into the 12th and then on into the 13th. An area of low pressure producing snow to the east of the country, this time the north and west largely dry. That cold pool having another go at getting back in at us through the middle part of the month. This is the 14th of February 1956, bringing that cold pool back in from the east once again. And it stays cold in towards the second half of the month as well. Many places have continuous frost between the 18th and the 25th of February. So temperatures, even at the end of February, which is quite unusual because the sun's rapidly warming up now, but temperatures stayed below freezing by both day and by night across many parts of the country through this point. Again, lots of dry weather, some snow in the south and the east close to the coast, but overall it's just very cold and very dry. There's the upper air temperatures again showing -10 ice firm across many parts of the country. Stays cold towards the end of the month, but the very closing days, this is probably why the central temperature doesn't come out even colder. It could have been even colder than central temperature of -0.2 had it not been for the very final days of the month, where the high pressure begins to move back towards its home in the Azores and the westerlies start to push back in once again. This is the final day of the winter of 1956. 29th of February was a leap year, and the westerlies are bringing mild air back in. If it hadn't been for those westerlies at the very end of February 1956, I reckon that month could have come away with central England temperature probably below -1. I say very much on a par with February 1986 in being really cold, generally very dry, and just continuously frosty. But of course, well remembered for those severe cold conditions that occur right at the opening of the month on the 1st and the 2nd, probably amongst, maybe not the, but amongst some of the coldest days of the 20th century. So that's it. That's our look at the winters of 1953-54, 1954-55, 1955-56. There was a very interesting situation at the end of 1956 in terms of the White Christmas that occurred in 1956 as well. I'm not going to look at that for this video. That's what I think to do over Christmas. Just want to show a bit of reanalysis that James has sent through. So I've got the charts a little bit mixed up, but I'm going to try and find those reanalysis charts for you. So let's just go through. There we go. We've got February 1954. I'll go back to pictures in a second. So this is the reanalysis from James for February 1954, and you can see how cold it was with the low pressure to the south generally, the ridge here across Scandinavia, and of course very easterly month as we've already seen. The 500 millibar height reanalysis for January 1955 looks like this. A lot of Greenland blocking occurring, a lot of northern blocking there with low pressure underneath it coming in off the Atlantic and also centred over Scandinavia. There's the winds from the east and the northeast as well. This is February 1955, even more severe month. We've got this deep trough in the north and the west of Europe, very extensive Greenland blocking. There have been a long time since we've had a combination of a very cold and blocked January and February. Well, I'm doing a video in 2016. I'm sure it'll occur before much longer, but there we are, really cold and blocked month, that one. And then this is how February 1956 looks. That's severely cold month with loads of high pressure to the north and across Scandinavia as well. The low pressure is generally to the south, and look at those winds screaming in from the east. No wonder it had essentially the temperature of below freezing. Thanks very much to James for supplying me with that reanalysis. So that's it really for the historic video for this bank holiday Monday. I'm just going to leave you with a few pictures. You had a quick sneak peek of those a second ago. So let's just quickly run through those. We've got a lady here in London. I think this is from the 15th of January 1955. A lady in London getting around on skis. I wonder what she made of the weather conditions that day. Not sure where this is, but this is again 1955 with a car in a snowdrift, and I think there's some sort of tractor either pulling it or clearing the road, not sure, but certainly a very snowy picture there. This is from Scotland. This is Operation Snowdrop. I think this is somewhere like Dundee, where they are trying to dig out some of the snow in 1955. Let's have a look at a few more pictures. This is people loading up a plane for Operation Snowdrop. Of course, we've already spoken about how severe conditions were during January and February 1955 across northern Scotland, and food parcels had to be dropped down up there during those two winter months. Of course, good preparation for 1963, because a much more widespread area was cut off by snow in 1963, and there had to be snow drops by air during the winter of 1963 as well. This again is from Operation Snowdrop. I think these are people up in the north of Scotland somewhere, maybe Stornoway, trying to collect those parcels that have been dropped from the air. This is from February 1955. I think this is Huddersfield Town Football Club, looking very, very cold on a snowy afternoon in February, on the 12th of February 1955. People getting around on skis during winter of 1955 as well. So I suppose that was the way to get around. If you're stuck in a snowdrift, take to your skis and see how far you can get. Now, this might be that picture I was talking about with the train stuck in a snowdrift. I'm not sure, but this is a train stuck in a snowdrift. Looks like it's over the Pennines somewhere. So maybe that's it or not. I'm sure somebody will know whether this is the snowdrift, training the snowdrift that I was talking about from Trevor Hardy. Be interesting to find out, but certainly a very wintry afternoon there, wherever that train happened to be stuck. This is from 1956. I'm not sure where this is. I think it's a football match being played in Birmingham or somewhere in the Midlands in February 1956. Very frozen, snow-covered pitch there. And then this is a bobby in London. I think probably on the 31st, the 30th or the 31st of January 1956, when that severe cold air was establishing from the east. The rain rapidly turned to powdery snow, as we know, and that's a very cold and snowy looking bobby on the beat in London at the end of January 1956. I love looking at those pictures with these historic videos because they kind of bring the weather that we've been talking about to life, and I love seeing the faces of those people experiencing these severe weather conditions. Well, that's it. That's the look at the winters of 1953, 54, 54, 55, and 55, 56. That follows on, of course, from the summers of the mid-1950s, but we did during the last bank holiday, Monday. So I think we're well and truly exhausted and finished with the mid-1950s. Now, normally, this bank holiday Monday, the end of May, I would do a summer update. Because I wanted to follow this on from the summers of the mid-1950s, I decided to do a winter update. But we're short of a summer update and a summer video, historic video. So I'm probably going to throw in an extra historic video sometime during July. And for that one, I want to look at some hot months. I'm going to look, I think, at July 1983 and July 2006, to really, really hot July. So that will be coming up in July sometime. The next Bank Holiday Monday historic video will be at the end of August. And I think for that one we may do the winter 2010. I'm not sure. But that's it for today's historic video. How long have I gone on for? 53 minutes. Easily the longest historic video that I have ever done. I'm going to try and make the next ones a little bit shorter, because I think these have been getting a little bit too long over the past couple of them. Thanks so much for sticking with it. If you've watched it from beginning to end, I really have to praise your perseverance. Thanks so much to all of you for sticking with this. And tuning in on your Bank Holiday Monday. Enjoy what's left of your Bank Holiday Monday. And at 54 minutes, I'm going to say thanks for watching and bye for now.